Joseph Frankie is a combat veteran, an award-winning author, and he has been included in the official top 100 innovators and entrepreneurs magazine, as well as rated 5 of the top 50 global thought leaders and influencers on careers in 2023. So I'm extremely pleased to have this conversation with you, and thank you for being here.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Lawrence, and look forward to it.
All right, so it's a great introduction, but what is even more interesting is that you bring 40 years of leading multiple businesses with projects up to 8 billion worldwide, and as many as 53,000 associates. So my first question to you is, what does it take to be able to tap into so many different industries? Because you have such a rich experience from the army, governmental projects, logistics, even the private and the public sector. You even mentioned software and so much more. So what does that look like? How are you able to essentially tap into all those industries?
Well, I really attribute that to my Army experience, because the Army basically gives you a multifunctional, you're just not in one vertical. You might be in a branch of services, but the problems you solve in your particular branch, mine was the Army. I was in the infantry for a while, special forces, and then in logistics. So you can imagine all three of those have unique problems to solve. And what's common to all of them is, go find the money. Where are we spending the money? How do we analyze what we're doing? What's our return for our investment? And those type of things. So as I gained more experience and higher responsibilities in the Army, the problems just got bigger and more complex.
Right.
So the way you had to solve them is you were the person that solved them when you were a junior officer. Then you got up to where you're supervising teams. You get promoted 10, 12 years in service. Now you're working with project teams. And then later on in your senior thing, you're really dealing with programs, which is a system of projects. And so consequently, you gain that experience, over time. And naturally, if you're successful in solving the problems, your potential is good and you get promoted.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And does this also relate to you being able to tap in all these different parts of the world? Because I know you mentioned you've essentially worked with industries like in the US and even China and South Korea, all the way to Germany and Europe, Saudi Arabia, all those different places. So does this also relate to your position that came from the army? Or is it some sort of different group of people that you're able to access? Like, what is the part of, putting yourself in all these different parts of the world, essentially?
Well, I mean, in a lot of these cases, the Army put me in these parts of the world. So consequently, you end up working with your partners in order to try to solve problems. You're either trying to move something, you're trying to find something, you're trying to get something, you're trying to order something, or you're trying to coordinate for the terrain necessary to put all this stuff someplace. So that required, civil interface. And so, you have to learn who you'd have to talk to in Saudi Arabia in order to be able to use, this square mile of land, and for what purpose. And so consequently, you end up getting a lot of experience. You don't think about it at the time. That was just your challenge to solve. But then over time, you've just been in different places solving different things.
Right. And I'm guessing it brings you that some sort of conclusion where you have a lot of insights as to how the world operates, right? Because I assume there's nuances to all the different parts in the countries, because it's not like, for example, if I'm in Europe and I'm going to another country, it's still Europe. But in your case, it's all the way from Asia to, the US. So that's very interesting. And what I like to know is, when you're working in all these different parts of the world, what are like the main similarities you see? Like, are there some conclusions where you think, hey, everything is fairly similar, or are there really hard differences between the geographical?
I would think that most of the world is similar, right? I'd say 60 to 75%. And it's
Yep.
the other 25% that you have to work with. Okay, what's it going to take, to get this accomplished? And maybe we can't get it accomplished. And the sooner that we accept the fact that we're not going to get it accomplished, then we can like start over and redo it. But the way I look at it is, everybody, any country, you have to move things. People have to work together. There's some sort of banking infrastructure. And so really, you're really working at the 25% of the nuance. Okay, how do we use all of these assets, in order to, get what we want? And that could be, trying to move military equipment, or it could be trying to put a deal together, in Germany, Germany has different labor laws than the United States. I've run across that a lot in dealing with people. Well, hey, you want to do that over there? And I said, well, I need to back up a little bit. Here is not there. So consequently, you need to think about it from this standpoint.
Okay. Very interesting. And continuing a bit further in the journey, it seems like the army is something you've always been carrying with you, because one of the things you're very active in right now is actually helping and mentoring, coaching people on having success on LinkedIn. And you're particularly also helping specifically veterans and students and executives. So first of all, you've wrote a book about this, you co-authored the book, and I wanted to know what really motivated you to do that, to write this book with Lori. What is that, what was the decision to say, I'm going to use this book now to bring out my knowledge to actually zoom into helping people with LinkedIn? What is that transition part?
What I found is both executives, and military leaders have the same challenge. And that is, how do you market your abilities in order to get your next opportunity? So when you look at the military people, if you're coming out of the military, depending on how long you've been in the military, but you're like being reborn into the private sector because you've been in a womb of something else. So when you're reborn, you've got to figure out your way in this new world. For example, so if you go on a resume and you try to say what you did in the Army, and you explain it in the Army vocabulary, nobody's going to understand it unless they've been in the Army. Mm. So you have to explain what you bring to the table in the vernacular of a hiring manager in the private sector. Because if you can't communicate to the hiring manager, you have absolutely no hope. And what happens is you're going to eventually learn that because you're not going to progress. But it's a hard learning thing. And that's what happened to me. So I learned it the absolute hard way. And my transition wasn't, as easy as I thought it was going to be. And so I bring that knowledge of what that pain feels like, when you're, trying to basically get employed, in the private sector.
Yeah. Because usually when we're talking about LinkedIn and growing on LinkedIn and all these things, there's some sort of almost expectation that it's always about entrepreneurs, business owners, whether that's people who are self-employed or they're having larger business. It's really that business contact. So what does make it really a must for veterans and army-related people as well to get on LinkedIn? Is it just to get get out of that world and transition into getting a corporate job? Or what is the main reason, let's say, for people in the Army and veterans to also tap into a place like LinkedIn?
Well, if it depends on what you're trying to do. Okay, if you're going into the trades are pretty good, right? You've gone to a trade, you've passed certain expectations, of whatever that trade is, and they kind of place you, they have a mechanism to do that. But if you're a junior leader and you're just trying to get into the world, then you've got to be able to articulate what you bring to the table and write a good resume against a position specification or job description. But more importantly, when I first got out, LinkedIn didn't exist in the way it does now. So now you have the ability, if you're a leader, to have somebody help you redefine, translate what you did in the private sector, what you did in the military sector, into terms that the private sector would say, well, okay, this person has this experience.
Yes.
I'll give you a quick example. One time, a acquaintance of mine saying, hey, I need a young, safety officer in the oil business. And I said, well, let me send this infantry lieutenant over. So he goes over, and the guy calls me back and said, well, I don't think he's going to be very good because he doesn't have this safety this, the safety that. And I said, look, everything in the military, safety is inculcated in everything you do. In other words, if you're going to eat a meal and say you were going to clean your utensils, there's a specific way to do that so that you don't get hurt doing it. Same way with operating a rifle, everything. And he said, well, what experience has this guy had? And I said, well, you never got to that, but, he was in charge of 18 teenagers with automatic weapons and explosives. So the first thing he had to do was train them how to not hurt themselves. The second thing is he had to train them to be able to work as a group and hurt the enemy and do that safely. And so when he looks at things, when he goes out and looks at things, he sees things that are innately unsafe because all his training was to look for unsafe situations. And he said, well, now that you explain that, send him back over here. So I said, look, he doesn't know anything about the oil industry. It's about safety wise, but he knows in a situation, if you take him out there, he'll know it doesn't look, hey, this is not right. This is not safe. And we can train him on the specifics that you want to know about.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. It's kind of like you'd have to position yourself in the best possible way for whatever that situation is. So it seems like you have to be very adaptable. Is that right? Like you have to be, yeah.
So military is adaptable. And one of the funniest things dealing with military people, I said, well, you need to describe some of your projects that you were successful in. Well, I never was a project leader. I say, did anybody ever give you an order in the military? And they said, well, yes, they gave me an order. And I said, well, the minute they gave you an order, they gave you a project.
Interesting.
If somebody gives you an order to move your squad, your 4 people, with you as supervisor over here, then you had to find a way to tell 4 people to get there safely.
Yeah.
So you had to do things, you had to watch out for things, you had to assess things, make a kind of a risk analysis of how you're going to get from A to B. So, there's a lot to be said for that kind of training.
Yeah. It actually reminds me of when I was in college because I was studying computer science, and essentially the skills I was learning were, you could say, hard skills. It was a specific skill, for example, web design or programming, which is actually a specific skill set. Now, next to that, we had some classes that were more related on professional development, as they call it, which zooms in more about the actual soft skills. And I found myself very interested in that. I really liked to develop myself in a way which is not related to my hard skills, but more as to, me as a person, my communication skills, the way I can make presentations, all those things. So I actually tend to be far more interested in that, which is also why I lead more to entrepreneurship rather than being the programmer, which is not the path I continue to it. But it seems that this is reflecting to what you're saying as well, where people actually have to be able to turn their hard skills to have to be able to turn their, direct expertise into a way where it comes over in a way that brings them the most benefits, whether that's getting that certain job or anything like that. And it seems like that's, using your soft skills more than your hard skills. Is that something you see often when you're helping and coaching these executive and veterans?
So when you take a look at a resume is about 95%, intellectual, IQ. And then the beautiful thing about a LinkedIn profile is you have the ability to merchandise your soft skills there, your emotional intelligence, your EQ, because you have all of that ability to tell story after story in various places. And what I find is most people do not, use only LinkedIn to the bare minimum, right? So if you imagine the Wall Street Journal, right? So we have the front page of the Wall Street Journal, we have below the fold, then we have pages 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And you have op-ed section, finance section, that like that. So most people just use the LinkedIn profile like the above the fold of the front page. But they forget that the EQ is in pages 2 through 5. And there's your awards, all kinds of things about what you bring to the table. And the reason I think the LinkedIn profile is so important is, for example, I say, look, I met this Lawrence guy today and he's really hot. I think he would do really good for you. And so the way I recommend you is, hey, I'm going to send you his profile.
Mm-hmm.
So now what I'm doing is I'm sending the avatar of Lawrence.
Right.
Right? So when the avatar is used, are you showing up?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, you're professionally dressed. We're having this talk. But would you want to show up virtually, in a T-shirt and flip-flops, look like you just came off a 4-mile run? That's not how you want to show up, right?
Right.
But some people can't understand why nobody is giving them a call or interested in them when they're not making the effort to, present themselves as you would like to present, and having a first meeting with someone.
Mm-hmm. I really like what you're saying there, and it's something which I kind of refer to as step 0. I'm very active in positioning yourself, kind of putting yourself in the best way out there, and we do this through a high level of really like building world-class websites, having PR in your name, things like that. But that step 0, which I just said, is really about making sure that your initial position is taken care of. And that's what I like so much about LinkedIn. Like, it has such detailed additions for your profile. You can add, as you're saying, your awards, your work experience in detail, but also you can feature articles. And as well, what is super good about LinkedIn as well is the fact that you can take these online courses. Like this learning portal from LinkedIn, I think it's super valuable. And it can actually show you that you've taken these courses, as well as external courses, right? Which is, as you're saying, it's this avatar of who you are. So on LinkedIn, which is not really out there on other platform, you can really link any type of certificate, whether that's from Microsoft, whether that's from LinkedIn itself, and it shows you the credible details. So I think you're spot on there, how you mentioned that this is so, important essentially of how you put yourself out there. What I'd like to ask you next is on the topic of LinkedIn and you having the book co-authored there. What is the main methodology that you're focused on besides this, like I call it the step 0? Is it really about the profile or more about the content? Are you using automation tools? Like, what does it mean for you to get the success on LinkedIn?
I think you can make it really complicated. Like anybody can sell you. You can have a television, right? You turn it on, you hook it up to the cable, it works. Or you have something that got 900 features that of which you don't use 800 of them.
Right.
So I think the most important thing about your profile and the thing that you have to understand about LinkedIn is the content. You're in a noun and verb war with your peers. Whoever you consider your peer competitor is, you're in a noun and verb war. And the reason I say noun and verb is the essential element of any sentence. Okay? And so that means sentences make up paragraphs. Paragraphs make up stories. So LinkedIn gives you the ability to tell story after story after story that you solve problems. Because when I go to look for new CEOs for companies and stuff, what they want is they just don't want a CEO. They give me a list of things that CEO, the problems they want that CEO to solve. Same with chief financial officer or anything like that. So the way that you find people is you do searches and you can find on LinkedIn, say, well, let's see, has this guy solved this problem that they're looking for?
All right.
So if you have solved that problem and nobody knows you did, then it's nobody's fault that nobody's calling you because nobody can see you.
Yep.
Okay.
That's so
And
true.
so
Mm-hmm.
when I first got in the search business years ago, we looked at 45 days of getting an executive, right? So getting 5 candidates, putting this big packet together and, all this stuff. And nowadays somebody wants something in less than 20 days,
Mm.
and so, I mean, all of that stuff of getting everybody together. And secondly, you find a good person. I mean, they're not just interviewing with me. If they're really good, they're interviewing with 2 or 3 people. And
Yeah.
so what, I have to say to clients is, look, if you think you want this guy, take a hard look, but make a decision because he's the type of person or she is the type of person that is not going to be on the market very long.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
so LinkedIn gives you this entire ability to market and merchandise yourself. Okay. And the one thing I tell everybody is if it's not on your LinkedIn profile, you never, ever, ever did it in your whole life.
Hmm. That's so good. Yeah.
And then secondly, if you put something on a resume that's not on your LinkedIn profile, then everybody has to wonder is, okay, he's got a LinkedIn profile over here. He's telling me one thing here, but he shows no record of it over here. So you create this doubt,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and if I'm a search consultant, I've got to bridge that. And the way I bridge that is I don't ever get there. In other words, I don't deal with people that, are not congruent, right?
Yep.
Because I tell people, I said, 10 years ago, I could call you up and say, hey, I recommend you fix this. And today, what happens is I just go to the next guy or gal that's already got their stuff together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I might come back to that person 6 weeks later and say, hey, let's talk about this last job. Let me give you some suggestions.
Yep. Yeah,
You
it's
know,
it's kind of you having standards to qualify people in your position as a search consultant there. And I'd also like to say that we're living in an accelerated reality. Everything is much faster than 10 years ago. 5 years ago, it's kind of changing in an almost insanely rate. So it's very interesting that you say that, and it's so true. Like if you have all these accomplishments, if you are doing whatever it is that you're doing and you're having such success there, if nobody sees it, nobody knows it. So especially in this digital age, visibility is so important. It's almost critical, right? It of course depends on your position, what your goals are and things like that. But if you're not able to take the best out of yourself, whether that's a problem yourself that you're saying, things like that, whether that's something completely else or just showing that you partnered up with a certain person or company, nobody knows it if you don't share it. So that's very good stuff. And one thing for myself as well that I wish I started doing sooner is writing more articles, because I like to create more content about myself. It's something I actually have to do way better in, but actually taking the time to study a subject and making my own conclusions or sharing my expertise and creating an article for my own is something I've been picking up this year, and I really like it because it allows me to actually put my attention and focus into a certain project, which allows me to have all that knowledge, but it also is a way how I can share with the world what my perspective is and what it is I'm doing. So, even an external topic which might not directly be a problem solving, it can show the way you think, and that part of your thinking pattern could already attract someone to hire you or to work with you, in my opinion. So, very good stuff. I like this conversation. So, I want to ask you one more thing about LinkedIn. So in a hypothetical scenario, let's say I'm starting out on LinkedIn, I'm looking to create content, and let's say my goal is either to have 10,000 followers or let's say generate monthly leads. What would you say are some non-negotiable activities? Like what is really essential to succeed? Because everything is nuanced. Like everything can work. There's so much different things. What is really like a non-negotiable?
okay, so say you're new to LinkedIn, right? So you've decided that you're going to make this effort, to be on LinkedIn and build a community, right? Well, the first thing I would suggest is you better understand how to use LinkedIn. And Lori and Mike O'Neill wrote a book called Rock the World with LinkedIn, and I consider it the best LinkedIn 101 book, out there, because it breaks each section down, right? So I still use that book as a research tool by section. So our book presupposes that you know how to use LinkedIn, and then it is trying to give you what you need to do in order to be out there.
Right.
And so one of the biggest claims that executives have, hey, look, I don't have time to spend all this time on LinkedIn, but, everybody tells me I have to be there. So, okay. So we wrote the book, The 5-Minute Drill for Executive Networking Success. So if they follow the checklist, in 5 minutes, they can do some things to leave their footprint on the LinkedIn trail. And I always suggest, okay, if you do it once in the morning, once in the evening,
Mm-hmm.
And the book, the first 7 pages, kind of tells you exactly what you got to do. The rest of the book tells you Lori's idea of how to use LinkedIn, and my idea. I'm kind of the LinkedIn military engineer type, right? Lori's touchy-feely. So I think the reason the book does real well is because, a man and woman wrote the book.
Interesting.
So it tells you kind of how to use LinkedIn. But the biggest problem I find with people is, and I use this in coaching. I said, you got to learn to use LinkedIn like a sword. It's a big, heavy thing, and you can't move it very fast. Then you learn to use it like a saber, and then you learn to use it like a scalpel.
Mm.
But what we have is people on LinkedIn trying to do brain surgery with a sword. It doesn't work well.
What would you say, if we dive into that a little bit more? What exactly would that mean?
So what I'm saying is they're trying to do advanced things without understanding the basics. I mean, LinkedIn is a very good thing where you crawl, walk, run. That's why I always say, if you want somebody to join you, build a profile so that somebody can see who you are. I have people that saying, well, this thing doesn't work. I said, but all you got one job listed. You're 35 years old. It doesn't say you graduated from high school. I said, if you sent me an invitation, I'm not going to join you because I don't know who you are. Because once I bring you into my community, I'm making a value judgment there.
Right.
Right. So what I say is, hey, learn how to use LinkedIn, learn how to get yourself out there. And there's plenty of suggestions, plenty of books. The 2 best books, I've got them on my website. They're Lori's Rock the World, and then right behind that is our book, The 5-Minute Drill for Executive Networking Success. Now, I had to use the word executive in there so that executives would, because they won't pick up anything unless it's got executive, but the book is being used in high school business classes.
Right. It's very interesting.
So the young people are starting to get it, okay, because they're starting way early. And, there's 14-year-olds using LinkedIn to get into an extremely restrictive private high school. And there's 84-year-olds using LinkedIn to get back in the workforce.
Yeah.
And
Goes from all different sides.
The bulk of the people I work with are 40-plus-year-olds trying to figure out, okay, what's next? Because at 40 years old, nobody's chasing you anymore. You really have to be out there to be found for what you bring to the table.
Right.
So I look at it as LinkedIn is a survival tool. If you want people to see you and you want to be competitive in the market, and people will say, well, Joe, if I'm working on my LinkedIn, my boss might think. I said, look, today, that might have been 10 years ago, but today, everybody is a professional. You have a professional responsibility to yourself to have a world-class LinkedIn profile, because if the company can see what you can bring to the table and their competition can, then the company is going to take care of you.
Yep. That's such a great way to put it. And I completely agree. So I want to ask you a few more questions, but let me start with this. What would you say for young entrepreneurs like myself? Maybe, people just starting out or Gen Z type of people like myself. What is a way for people in my position or younger people in general to get the respect from people who are actually decades of experience, richer in experience, or who have more formal backgrounds? Like, what is a way for a person like myself or others to be able to connect with people like you, essentially?
Well, so I'm pretty much an open connector, but I'm not going to connect with you unless I talk to you. And so when I send that message back, here's my calendar, for a 15-minute call, that gets rid of 87% of the people. So I have to wonder, is it they don't want to take 15 minutes to meet me? Or is it a robot sending me a request?
Yep.
Because a robot can't have a one-on-one conversation with me.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So I want to ask you about two more questions, and this is more related to the business aspect. Because you have such a vast expertise, I want to have your input on navigating decisions as well as management and business in general. So,
Okay.
Since you have so much experience in different environments, circumstances, which is most likely far more richer and far more variety than a lot of business owners, I'm curious, how do you measure what amount of risk to take? And what I mean by that is if you're looking to say, okay, I'm going to devote X time in this, or I'm going to loan money to put in my business, or I'll be focusing with my team on certain type of activities with an expect to have those positive results. What is your process look like for measuring what what risk to take and how big of a risk you can take, essentially?
Well, I think the keys to my success have been taking calculated risk. Okay. And the calculated risk is something where you take, almost every piece of data that you can find that's around you into making your decisions. Because if you just go make a decision, then that's a gamble, right?
Yep.
Okay. So there's a big difference between calculated risk and gamble. And I don't think you can succeed without a system of taking calculated risk. And I think I have a lot of wisdom, and wisdom is a result of failure, making bad decisions. So not every decision you're going to make is going to work out for you. Sometimes, in the military, I have to step back and say, okay, I said I'm going to do this. But in the military, I mean, nobody takes any excuses for, not completing the mission. So, but in business, sometimes you're given the mission and all of a sudden you're in a cul-de-sac. In other words, you're in it, but there's no way out of it. So the sooner you realize that you just back up, come to the left or right, and try something else, it's a lot better. So to me, risk-taking is absolutely essential. And when you can fail with the minimum amount of loss and get your data point and then make your shift.
Yep. Okay. I like that. And then I have a second last question, which is more directly to structuring leadership. So how do you exactly structure the environment that gives you the power and control that you need as a business owner, as well as allowing a healthy group of individuals? So something I've been seeing, which is kind of a challenge, is as a business owner, you have to be very firm. You have to make, standing ground. You need to make sure that you own the control and power in a lot of situations. But at the same time, if you have employees, if you have a team, you need to make sure that you're actually coaching them, give them the space to grow, allow them to have the responsibility. So what is that good combination to essentially create a healthy as well as thriving culture?
I always tried, even in the military, to try to find people that were smarter than me. Because if I was the smartest guy in the room, we're hurt. So, but everybody has their own strengths, right? So in your case, you have these strengths with, the media. You've been through the process. You know how to program. So if you have a programming challenge that comes up, you kind of know, how to assess it, what it's going to cost, the man hours involved, because you've done that. So the key is getting the people on your team in the right seats, so that you collectively can progress.
Okay. That makes so much sense. And then my final question to you is, what would you say is the next level for yourself?
Well, the next level for myself, I'm just, we're getting ready to start a energy company. So looking forward to that. It'll be in the energy storage assemblage arena. So, and I'm getting ready to be on 2 more boards. They're both startups. So, we're going through, the process to do that. But, there's a lot of work out here. There's a lot of fun out here, and I enjoy it. I enjoy building things. I enjoy working with people, and I really enjoy the one-on-one coaching that I do. And I've coached 730 people in the last 8 years.
It's so incredible. And Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time here. I think it was amazing. Is there any last note you would like to share?
I'd say LinkedIn is your billboard to the world. Do you want a small billboard? It's up to you.
All right. That's so great. Thank you, everyone, for checking in here. And Joseph, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Lawrence. It was a lot of fun.